What's up, Poke fans? I am your host, Phoenix, and I just finished the Indigo Disc DLC for Pokemon Violet, and it really got me thinking, there seems to be an issue here. Nobody is loving the DLC, not that it isn't fun, but everyone seems to feel like it's just okay, and I think I know what the problem is. Let's start with how I feel about the DLC. I think it was great. To be honest, I really enjoyed both DLCs a lot more than I like the DLCs for Sword and Shield. I know there was a lot to love from the Crown Tundra, but I want to tell you why I was meh about it. Whenever the main point of a Pokemon game or DLC is about recatching all the legendaries, I quickly become uninterested. I did, however, enjoy the short story that was there. I enjoyed the Reggie quest, but for the most part, I could care less about catching, again, the same Pokemon we've caught every year, especially legendaries. As I explained in a previous video, unless you are missing one for competitive play, I don't see anyone getting excited about chasing them all over again. I praise the base game of Scarlet and Violet because they allowed you to catch and use a number of legendaries during your playthrough. That was exciting, but giving me the chance to catch Dialga and Palkia for the 4th time in 4 years just to put in my box? Nah, I'm good. Don't get me wrong, the Indigo Disc does have the same thing, but that isn't the main focus. What I love about the DLC is that it changes it up using the double battles. And not just double battles, but they have strategies. And if you face the new Elite Four, they have semi-competitive teams with some interesting strategies. This caused me to change up my team and add some support Pokemon, and change my moves around from all attacking to a mix of support and attack. I had the most fun I've had in a long time battling. I love the fact that if you want to, before you even start those battles, you could have grabbed some beloved starter Pokemon. Albeit you had to grind out BP to 3000 depending on what you wanted, but still, it was something that you could definitely do. The story was basic, but it was fun, and the final boss of the story was a challenge. As I didn't look up anything, I had no idea what I was facing or how the mechanics worked, which I said in the previous video is how Pokemon became so easy because we've had so much information on how to approach basic battles. Now to the issues. 1. I think Game Freak needs to stop with the split of 2 DLCs. It doesn't work. It makes zero sense. Just like the DLC for Sword and Shield, the first DLC is barely anything and makes you feel like you wasted your money. The second DLC for both games have had so much more content and reasons to grind. In other words, if Game Freak is going to release DLC, which I think is way better than re-releasing the same game with DLC type content attached, they need to release it all at once. I think both Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet DLCs would have felt a lot better if it was all together. This solves a couple of issues. Number 1, it would make us as the consumer feel like it was worth the $35. Perception is reality, and when you get the first part of the DLC and you finish it in 3 hours, you feel like, yeah, this wasn't worth half the price of the game, so Game Freak, what are you doing over there? The second thing is, it would make the game and the story feel more connected. Being able to bounce back and forth between both areas, even if you need to beat one before the other, allows you to dump in about 8 hours of base DLC, and if you want, there's a few more hours of stuff to do afterwards. The second issue, I think, falls on the fans. Not all the fans, but a subset of them. Before I explain why, let's put this out there. Scarlet and Violet are the buggiest games that Game Freak has ever released, and it doesn't help that they just decided that they're not going to fix it at all between 2 DLC drops. That is not only a fair criticism, but is also a necessary one to point out because games are too expensive to have broken products. With that out of the way, let's get back to us. The sad and unavoidable truth is that a lot of us grew up playing Pokemon, and like all franchises, we wanted Pokemon to grow up with us. But that isn't the case. If you're like me, you play them every year, and like watching a sibling or a child in your house grow up, you don't really notice how tall they've gotten over the course of a few years because you see them every day. It's not until a distant relative sees them for the first time in years that they go, oh wow, you've really grown since the last time I've seen you, you were really tiny. Well, think back to what Pokemon looked like during the black and white games, and then compare it to Scarlet and Violet. There are massive changes and upgrades, but that was over the course of 13 years. But to fans who play year in year out, it seems like they only improve an inch each year. Pokemon, for better or worse, is a kids game and franchise that just so happens to have adult fans, and we have to come to that understanding. I really started to understand that the last 5 years. As a father, my son's first Pokemon game was Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which was in 2018. And to me, that was one of the low point games of Pokemon's history when taken by itself. My son, 8 years old at the time, absolutely loved the game. Watched him play with his Pikachu and some of his favorite Pokemon from Ash's teams took me back to my first Pokemon games and how I felt. We had a ball playing together, not because the game was amazing to me, but because I was feeding off his excitement and how good it felt to get him into the series that I had loved for years. 5 years later, we've been playing through the DLC for Scarlet and Violet and really enjoying it, but I see him starting to pivot more to anime and anime games. He has slowed down watching the Pokemon anime and is no longer collecting the toys or cards. He's growing up and moving on to more age-appropriate hobbies. So when you look at the reviews for Pokemon in the past 5 to 10 years, and the reoccurring theme is, where's the big jump? They need to make it harder. Where are the darker stories? Well, I have news for you, wonderful Pokemon fans. It would be awesome that they did that, but they don't need to because these games aren't built for you. I have had many conversations with friends of mine who have kids, and they're having a blast playing Pokemon with them, introducing them to older games, much like I did with my kids. But chances are, as they get older, they will replace those Pokemon games with some form of Call of Duty, Mortal Kombat, or Fortnite type franchises. So when you look at how to fix the biggest problems of Pokemon, it might be as simple as just looking in the mirror and saying, it's time to move on. Now, for me, I'm a big kid, so I'm going to enjoy these games like I was 8 years old. And once I finish, I'm going to jump right back into Baldur's Gate 3 like the grown-ass kid I am.